First and foremost, as I begin this discourse, I wish to share with you that I am experiencing immense gratitude at the opportunity to be able to teach or convey what I have learned at the feet of my own teacher. There are teachers who are groomed by the acharyas to memorize each verse and then teach it. And they are expounding upon it day in and day out. I was not taught merely this scripture, but I have been receiving many scriptures from my teacher. And they range from Advaita Vedanta scriptures to yoga philosophy, as in the Vedantic tradition, and also the Ayurveda scriptures. However, my relationship with Bhagavad Gita is unique, dear students, because not only was I fortunate to receive it multiple times from the auspicious mouth of my own teacher as he discoursed, I was able to listen in, contemplate, but I was ultimately able to use this knowledge in my life. And I believe that this knowledge has become a raft upon which I am seated. And no matter how turbulent the waters of my particular samsara, internal emotional waters and outer existential waters, no matter how turbulent they are, I feel like my raft is somehow floating above the water. And no matter how much the waves are tossing me around, I find that Bhagavad Gita has become that amazing leak-proof boat that allows me to experience an abiding state of joy, Paramananda. So it cannot be interrupted. I may have difficulty. I might be negotiating my way through that difficulty. I might be finding a solution, a worldly solution to it. But apart from that inconvenience, I also have a state of an uninterrupted sense of peacefulness. And I think I owe it completely to the fact that I received the Bhagavad Gita and I try to live its message. So as a teacher, my credentials to teaching this not only come from my receiving it, not merely reading it, but receiving it live from a teacher who lived it. So a key teaching in the first chapter is there are two key teachings. One key teaching, dear students, is the teaching of the fundamental disease that is eating us away from inside out. Like in Ayurveda, we have doshas. In Bhagavad Gita or in Vedanta, Upanishadic teachings, there is a fundamental disease, the disease of attachment, the disease of sorrow that engenders from that attachment. And then finally, the corruption of our thinking ability, our discernment ability, our judgment ability. So we live in some state of self-hypnosis, a delusion. And so we start thinking that what is wrong is essentially right. And what is right or may have worked for our teachers is probably wrong for you. So our perception of things and our conclusions becomes warped. And so it's a state of delusion. And because of delusion, then we, instead of loving things, which is a healthy state, but a non-obsessive state, it's an omnipotent, sovereign state, love. We become attached, we become fused. And then we have more sorrow, and then we have more delusion. So we get caught up in a cycle of what is known as ragaha, attachment, suffering, shokaha, emotional suffering, private emotional suffering, and then a state of fundamental misperception, misjudgment, wrong calculation, wrong moves, known as moha. And in this first chapter, known as Arjun Vishad Yoga, first Adhyaya, we get introduced to this fundamental human condition. And from verse 1 to 20, you shall be receiving a description. The story shall continue of the preparation of the armies, the two armies which I have been talking about. The army led by the evil-minded, ego-driven person called Duryodhana, a prince, and the other army led by noble-minded people, of which one of the main characters was Arjuna, who is a dharma or a noble-minded prince. And they are both contesting a throne, the right to a throne to the kingdom of Hastinapur. And we see a continuing of that story. From verse 21 to 25, we shall see that Arjuna asks his chariot driver, who happens to be his maternal uncle slash friend slash mentor, not guru yet, but definitely someone he holds in wise esteem, in high esteem, who is Lord Krishna himself. And he asks Krishna that, can you drive me into the middle of this battlefield so that I can look at who all is present. Then from verse 26 to 28, we see something interesting. We see that in our noble-minded hero who has won every war to date, who is very beautiful, very handsome, very powerful, and one of his name is Dhananjaya, very abundant in every field of his life, he gets overcome by attachment. So we see the emergence of ragaha in Arjuna. Then from verse 28 to 34, we see shokaha, or suffering, emotional suffering in our hero. So it's progressing, the disease is progressing. And then from 35 to the last verse, 47, we see full-blown delusion or moha in our hero Arjuna. And he thinks that and actually what's wrong to do, which later Krishna says that's not the right path for you, he thinks that's the right path. And what was the right thing to do, he believes that's the wrong thing. And one of the distinctions between attachment and the state of love, and I've expounded upon that in the intro to Ayurveda, is that when we experience love in our bosom, we actually we feel relieved. We don't suffer as much. We don't feel emotionally strangulated. We feel truly expansive, lighter. But when that so-called love is really attachment masquerading as love, we feel heavy, constricted, irritated, frustrated, broken, shattered. Our personality becomes shattered. And we confuse right and wrong, and we confuse dharma and dharma. So from that, we can diagnose that Arjuna was experiencing ragaha, attachment, and not prema, which is love. So this is one purpose of the chapter 1, which is to introduce us to our own attachments, our own emotional suffering that we have created, not others, because of these attachments, and how we carry around clouded thinking and make wrong choices as a result, which is our own self-generated delusion, and how we get caught up in that cycle is the purpose of chapter 1. Another purpose of chapter 2 is to introduce us to a very primary relation. So one function, as I mentioned, was to reveal to us a fundamental issue as to what Arjuna was suffering from. And the idea is that by the time I complete this chapter 1, it should not remain merely Arjuna's dilemma, but you should identify with, I am also not suffering from this problem of ragaha, attachments. Shokaha, this emotional agitation, anxiety, sorrow, disconnectedness, alienation, sense of hopelessness. All Shokaha takes many forms. And is perhaps I not therefore confused in my life, therefore taking actions that seem to trap me more and more rather than liberate me and set me free? So am I suffering from this condition is the question. The other issue that we want to find out is this relationship, like I mentioned, between teacher and student, guru and shishya. So we shall encounter two sets of teacher and student in this chapter 1 itself. So pay attention. And the two sets, one is Duryodhana, I shall just for easy sake call him the egotistic prince, and his teacher, Dronacharya, Acharya Drona, or Acharya Drona we say, or Drona. And there is the other pair, which is Arjuna and his teacher, Krishna. It's very subtle. Recently, I've never really read commentaries by other teachers, but recently I looked at one or two commentaries, including the one by Professor Radhakrishnan that I have recommended all of you to have with you. I looked at one or two other acharyas, but I didn't come across exactly this teaching, but Baba always emphasized upon it that we can actually look at these two sets of student teacher and we get introduced to who is a true student and who is a real teacher. And how do we become a worthy student? Because it's not just worthy to get stars or, get earn some accolades or, look special in the eyes of someone we think is an authority figure, such as our guru. We want to become worthy students because we ultimately want to receive from the ultimate reality, Brahman, the self, the supreme self, and his message as Lord Krishna through the Bhagavad Gita. So a true student becomes an adhikari or a receiver of that knowledge. And when we say receive, it doesn't just mean today if you have 20 million concepts in your brain, by the time you end with Bhagavad Gita, you have 80 million concepts. Blah. Your brain just gets heavier and busier, albeit in Sanskrit, but it's still stuffed. But when you become a worthy recipient of the Gita, then there is a new light in our consciousness, and that light shall quieten your mind, lighten your load, and your each thought will be a valuable thought that is creating your destiny with its birth in your mind. Your mind will become a beautiful instrument of your spirit rather than something that is sabotaging you. So we shall, this first chapter sheds light upon it. Certain teachers, and I can understand, do not expound upon chapter 1. Or you can say that the amount that I've already expounded upon in the intro series is enough. And then they simply jump to chapter 2, verse 11, where Bhagwan Krishna, Lord Krishna, begins giving his message, his teaching. And even our lineage teacher, Adi Shankaracharya ji, in his commentary, begins with that. However, I do like to expound upon chapter 1. Baba also expounded upon it and pointed out some things for our attention. And I personally believe that what happens during the teachings of chapter 1 is that the students who are meant to drop off, drop off. That's what happens. So that by the time chapter 2, verse 11 begins, the teacher, the giver of the message, is left with a tight group of students who really want to receive it. So I believe that everything has a purpose. And it also helps us diagnose the problem rather than studying the Bhagavad Gita from like, yeah, we're studying a scripture. Oh, yeah, it's so cool. We're studying a Sanskrit scripture. Oh my God, I've always wanted to look at the Bhagavad Gita or look at it externally. We can look at it with a sense of samarpan, surrender. And an emotional appeal to the Supreme Reality to help us. And if you've ever appealed for help, if you've ever questioned, who am I, why am I, and what am I doing here, then probably if you are patient, and if it is Supreme Will, then through this journey you shall receive many, many answers, and they will all lead you inwards. And the interesting thing is that, Bhagavad Gita is considered an Upanishad, and it is the essence of the Upanishads. But while the Upanishads were taught in forest, pristine, quiet locations, amid snow-clad mountains, Bhagavad Gita is taught among the din and the roar and the bloodshed of a battlefield. And this explains that you don't have to come to Bhagavad Gita already in a state of rarefied consciousness. You could come to this classroom bleeding. You could come to this classroom wounded. You could come to this classroom really reduced to your lowest self, and you shall still be redeemed through knowledge, through knowledge. Jnanam moksha karanam. The word moksha is very important for us because moksha comes from two words, moha plus kshaya. Kshaya means the destruction of what? Moha, delusions. So ultimately, Bhagavad Gita's goal is to teach us dharma, which is right thought, right action. And ultimately, while thinking right and acting right, we have a destruction of all our delusory thoughts and concepts. And as we exfoliate, we peel away these false layers of perception, which our ego has been smoking freely and creating clouds around us. Essentially, what is left behind is your essential nature. So Bhagavad Gita ultimately teaches you how to embody your essential self, which in itself is bliss incarnate, which in itself is the ultimate reality. So there's a very paradigm shifting knowledge that is awaiting us. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita is a moksha shastra. It is the scripture that leads us to moksha. And it begins with a recognition that you are wounded in different ways. And it's okay to accept that. So let's take a moment, be quiet, close your eyes, and just be grateful for this opportunity to receive this and that you are indeed a recipient of this knowledge at this point, It's truly a blessing. Now, let me begin with chanting a few shlokas. We are beginning with chapter 1, the first adhyaya. the chapter of the yoga of Arjuna's grief. Verse 1. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamakaha pandavascheva kim kurvat sanjaya. Sanjay uvacha दृष्ट्वा तु पाण्डवानीकं व्यूढं दुर्योधनस्तदा आचार्यमुपसंगम्य राजा वचनमब्रवीत् पश्येतां पाण्डुपुत्राणाम् आचार्यमहतीं च मूम् व्यूढादुपदपुत्रेण तव शिष्येण धीमता अत्र शूरा महेश्वासा भीमार्जुनः समायुधि युयुत्थानो विराटश्च द्रुपदश्च महारथः दृष्टकेतुश्चिकीतानः काशीराजश्च वीर्यवान् पुरजित् कुन्तिभोजश्च शैबश्च नरपङ्गवः युधामन्युश्च विक्रान्तः उत्तमौजाश्च वीर्यवान् सौभद्रो द्रौपदेयाश्च सर्व एव महारथाः अस्माकं तु विशिष्टाये तान्निबोध द्विचोत्तम नायका मम सैन्यस्य संज्ञार्थ तान् ब्रवीमि ते भवान् भीष्मश्च कर्णश्च कृपश्च समतिञ्जय अश्वत्थामा विकर्णश्च सौमदत्तिस्तथैव च अन्ये च बहवः शूरः मदर्थे त्यक्तजीविताः नानाशस्त्रप्रहरणाः सर्वे युद्धविशारदाः अपर्याप्तं तदस्माकं बलं भीष्माभिरक्षितं पर्याप्तं त्वदमेतेषां बलं भीमाभिरक्षितम् अयनेषु च सर्वेषु यथा भागामवस्थिताः विश्वमेवाभिरक्षन्तु भवन्तः सर्व एव हि तस्य सञ्जनयन् हर्षं कुरु वृद्ध पितामहः सिंहनादं विनोद्योच्चैः शङ्खं ददमो प्रतापवान्. So I chanted to you verse 1 to verse 12. And let me go over this with you. In the first verse, I have already mentioned this probably in my intro series, that there is only one verse by the blind king, Dhritarashtra. And this blind king is not only blind physically, but he's blind to dharma. He's blind to justice. He's blind to his ultimate duty as a king, as a protector of his citizens, which is the duty of a king. So he's blind to any higher way of living. And the story begins with Dhritarashtra, just this one verse by him, saying that he asks his own chariot driver, whose name is Sanjaya, that he says that in Kurukshetra, which is the name of the battle front, Kurukshetra, the land of the Kurus, which is also a dharmkshetra because it was a pious land. The two armies the two opposite armies have assembled, and which are the Pandavas, his brothers, 5 sons, and their supporters, who are claiming right to that throne of Hastinapur. of which Arjuna is a part. And then he says, and my sons, mamakaha. This is the word that you should underline, mamakaha, mine. How are those guys and my people doing? Kim kurvat. How's it going, Sanjaya? Because Sanjaya, the word Sanjaya, the name Sanjay, comes from two words Samjaya, who has become fully victorious of his own senses. Only a pious person, he had an inner vision to be sitting in the palace of Hastinapur, and he had been gifted this divine vision by Vyasa, the author, to close his eyes and see the entire war taking place, the whole battle. He had special satellite download going on in him in a divine sense, and he was reporting to Dhritarashtra, and the use of the word mine and them. Because if you think about it, he was uncle to both, the father to one and a blood related uncle to the other. He could have said, how are my sons and my nephews doing? He didn't say my nephews. He said, how are my bracket sons and them doing? So you can see that the king pretended to be helpless, but there are always such egotistic people who lead to global warfare and small and big warfare. So that's one thing. So then Sanjaya, in response to the query, starts reporting, and he says that looking at the arrangement of the army, viewdom, the army arrangements, the egotistic, evil son Duryodhana of Dhritarashtra, who was leading the more evil-sided army. But of course, he can't say your evil son was walking up. He just said, your future king, your son. So he uses the word Raja, king, future king, your son Duryodhana walks up. So he's saying remotely, and he's saying, your son, the future king Raja. So he says, your son, King Duryodhana, even though he's still a prince contesting for it, he says, your son, bracket, King Duryodhana, looking at the assembled army of his 5 brothers, the Pandavas, is walking up to his own Acharya, to his own teacher Drona, to have a talk with him, to talk to him. And he could have just said Raja Bravit, but he says Raja Vachana Bravit. Vachan means to give a speech. It's very interesting, which means that it was not like Duryodhana was walking up to his teacher for something important, to have some discussion before the war started. He was actually walking up with a stance to deliver a speech. And then he says that he walked up to his Acharya, and what does he say? This Duryodhana says that, by the way, can you see that the army, the sons of Pandava, the Pandav sons have created? And that, because at one time Drona was that when there was no army and they were all living together as 2 branches of one family, Drona had been Acharya, archery teacher to both the sets of cousins. So he said, by the way, can you see that the army that has been put together by Pandavas, by the 5 brothers, which is being led by the son of Drupad, who's their army lead, who was also formerly an archery student of Drona. Can can you see them? And he says, and can you see led by your student, which meant it was like he was showing his concealed spite to Drona, saying, gosh, back then, when you were teaching both sets of cousins, didn't you know better to teach this person called the son of Drupad, who learned from you and is now standing on the other side of the army? So, look at the way Duryodhana goes up to his teacher. Now, the war is about to start. Any moment, the first gunshot can happen, technically speaking. And instead of being poised to go to war, you can see the anxiety Duryodhana has, that he walks up to his teacher to play what we call as the blame game. You sit with that. It's a classic blame game. All your fault, teacher. Didn't you know better? Okay. So the word here, that is tava shishyena dhimata. And tava shishyena, tava means your shishya. And dhimata means your cunning student. Didn't you know better than to teach that person, your cunning student? Okay, so he didn't even stop there, assuming that he already pre-calculated in his mind that his teacher could respond thus. His teacher could say, come on, Duryodhana, stop panicking, looking at that one man who's albeit leading the army of the good Pandus, who is the son of Drupad. Forget about him. We have many, many great soldiers on our end. We'll easily corner him. Forget that I taught him. I taught him when I needed to teach him. We didn't know there was going to be a battle and we'll have to take sides. Why do you bother? Let it go. So, pre-assuming that this would be an argument, Duryodhana does not stop. Duryodhana now goes on to convince and lay weight to his argument as to how great that opposite army is. So he's like, berating. So he gives 3 more shlokas trying to prove his point, and he says that in that opposite army, there are great heroes, warriors, who have the same capacity like Arjuna and his brother Bhima. There were 5 brothers, Arjuna, Bhima, Nakula, Sahadeva, and Yudhishthira. So not only are they great soldiers like Bhima and Arjuna, but there is also, who are great heroes in war, but there are other great, he could see that there is the Virat, the king of Virat, whose name is Satyaki, the king of Virat. There is, Drupad, the king, who is also a Maharatha. A Maharatha is one who can, in a single instance, kill 10,000 archers. In one bow, he kills 10,000. So they are Maharathas. Then in the second verse, he says, and then there is Drishtaketu, there is Chekitanaha, there is Kashiraja. These are all Viryas. These are very valiant heroes. There is Purajita, there is Kunti, there is Bhoja, there is Saibashya. These are all great manly heroes. So these are all names right now, but I'm showing you that they were this, what was happening. And he was pointing out, look at them, look at them, look at them, And then he says, and then there is a valiant Yudhamanyu. There is the amazing, courageous Uttamauj. And then there is Saubhadra's sons. There is Draupadi's sons. These are all Maharathas. They are like great archers. They don't just kill one person with their bow. They kill 10,000 at a time, So he convinced. So he was building up his argument around, look at that. And you can imagine what that happens to us too when we want to feel like there is a problem. So we build up and we look at where we are weak. So we tend to do that. Then, and then, because Drona kept quiet, And we do that. We start like judging our situation. We start mentally, playing games with ourselves. So first Duryodhana points out how big they are. And then he does this competitive scenario of how is he doing. And he says, and FYI, Tanni Bodha, may you know, FYI, let me tell you, O Dvichottama, the great among the Brahmins, um, who are the Nayaka, the leaders on my side. Now, if you come up to me one day and you say, and FYI, the great among the scholars, I personally feel affronted. I feel like you're like, kind of making fun of me. Because why? Because it's like, oh yeah, Madam Scholarly, expert Bhagavad Gita, did you not know better? So it's in a spiteful vein that he calls his own guru Dvijottama. And just to let you know that we will come across this, but these are these varnas, and each varna has certain propensities of personality, and they have certain do's and don'ts attached to them. So one of the do's of the Brahmin Varna is study, pray, teach. One of our don'ts is don't earn, don't go to battle, don't try to build, don't try to like become a trader, So in another context in Mahabharata, Drona had come under fire by somebody called Bhishma, the grandfather of Pandus and Kauravas, saying, what are you, a Brahmin, taking sides in war? And so it's interesting that you look even at the teacher, even though he's a great Acharya, and he has taught the very teams that are fighting, he's himself taking a stand and he's fighting, he's supporting. So you can see now that though he's an Acharya, he's not fully clear. And because of that, his own student is somewhere spiting him and saying, and by the way, let me recount what all do we, who are the leaders, Nayaks on our end. So then he says, you, Bhavana, then Bhishma, the grandsire of both sides, Karna, Kripa, and these are all Samitinjaya. They are all have been victorious at war. Then there is Ashwathama, then there is Vikarna, then there is Somadatti, the son of Somadatti. So these people are with us. Then he says, Annecha Bahava, many other Shuras, many other brave ones. Another interesting one, Madarte, Tyakta Jivitaha. For me, see again that me comes up. For me, Tyakta Jivitaha, they are willing to even lose their life. Okay. And for me, they have come forward, because just like in World War I and II, it was between two countries, but then many people joined, random countries were joining, and the war and fighting. In the same way, many kingdoms, many leaders had come forward to take sides. And he says, for me, Tyakta Jivitaha, they are ready to shed their, shed their lives. And Nana Shastra Praharnana. So Shastra means what you hold in your hand, weapon. And Praharanaha is missile. So you leave it. And missiles in Mahabharata time, they were powered not by atomic fuel, but they were powered by mantra. That is how in Mahabharata, in Ramayana, Ram used a grass, one blade of grass, and said a mantra and became a Brahmastra. So these missiles would travel thousands of miles and do what they were meant to do. So he said that my soldiers have not only weapons, but they have missiles. And so he talks about it. And they have Yuddha Vishardaha. They have much Visharad. They have much skills and talent in Yuddha war. And then we come to an interesting verse 10 has been interpreted two ways. So I'll tell you the way it has been interpreted in our lineage. And interestingly, I found that Radhakrishnanji does not do it that way, but I have reasons why it should be interpreted the way I will tell you. And Swami Chinmayanand and all that group says, it should be interpreted both. It can be interpreted either way. But Shankaracharya and our lineage believes that it should be interpreted. So this is one of those texts that are interpreted differently. So I shall read out to you. So he says, aparyaptam, it is insufficient. So he says, so therefore, this army of ours, which is defended by our grandfather Bhishma, is insufficient. Whereas that army of theirs, which is defended by Bhima, one of the brothers of Arjuna, is sufficient. Okay. Another way it can be, this army of ours protected by Bhishma is unlimited, whereas that army of theirs protected by Bhima is limited. But I would say, and our view is, what he's trying to say is that aparyaptam, that we are not enough. We are not enough. Our army, so he has a subjective weakness. And, interestingly, when you look at, if you go back to Mahabharata, there was actually a difference that Duryodhana had, I believe, 11 troops, 11 mighty troops of millions of soldiers having weapons and missiles. And Arjuna's army, represented by his brother Bhima, had only 7. So if you looked objectively, Duryodhana was stronger. If you looked objectively, Duryodhana had many more kingdoms because of his terror. He had forced many more kingdoms to give him their troops and their weapons. In fact, even when Krishna, who was a king, had offered, what do you want? Do you want my army or do you want me? Very cleverly, Duryodhana had chosen his vast army. And poor Arjuna and Bhima had only chosen one human being, one albeit radiant sattvic human being, Krishna. And Krishna had millions of elephants and horses and, archers and, spear people and all those things, missile throwers. And he had taken all of that. So if you think about it, there was every reason for Duryodhana to feel confident, but instead he feels inwardly weak. And therefore the next line totally makes sense. He says, and therefore he tells all his teacher Drona, and he's now talking to everyone, and he says, therefore, at whichever point you are stationed, avasthita, yata bhagam, wherever you have become stationed very vigilantly, Bhishma meva bhirakshantu. Please fully control our leader, our grandfather Bhishma. So there's Bhima and Bhishma. Let us protect our leader, our chief, army's chief of staff, Bhishma. Wherever you are, no matter where you are 360 degrees located, your one eye should be fighting your enemy, and your one eye you should be protecting your chief of staff, which is their collective grandfather, Bhishma. This is why, because if he was feeling confident, he'll be fine. But instead he says, and therefore better protected. And I want to tell you that one of the reasons, in spite of sometimes having material wealth, having material support, having friends, having the degrees, we feel inwardly weak. We feel insecure. And the reason for that is that when we are not following dharma, we have the knowledge that it's an invisible sin. It's like an invisible, because your soul knows that you have been adharmic. This whole war was based on an adharmic premises, and Duryodhana was a man driven by his ego. He wanted not only his land, he didn't even want to give 5 villages to his brothers. His 5 brothers had even agreed to settle down with 5 villages. He won't do that. On top of that, they had tried to molest and disrespect their wife in public. They had left no chance of humiliating the others, and they wanted more and more and more. And they even tried to kill the brothers. They tried to burn the house down in which they were sleeping. So he had done everything. And he was, of course, the king, and he could justify everything, just like sometimes we commit the crime, and then we justify it to ourselves and to everybody else that this is the right thing for them to do. But deep inside, you know it, and you don't get that internal security because of that. So this is very interesting. Now, in the meantime, here ends his talking. So then Sanjay Uvacha, that at that time, the chief of the Kaurava army, their grandfather, Bhishma, he was an old man, many hundred years old, very strong man. He knew that, look, now he didn't approve of Duryodhana's war, but he knew they were at a war, and he was performing his duty as the army in chief. Now we have to win this war. So he wanted to arouse, generate sanjanaya, harshaha, enthusiasm, because he could note that all this mathematics that Duryodhana's Arjuna is doing, who has more, who has less, who is weak, who is strong, he needs to be roused. So therefore, Pitamaha, grandsire, he blew his conch like a huge lion's roar, and Dadhamao, he roared, he blew through his conch, and this powerful grandsire, he did that, okay? Which meant enough calculation, enough second thoughts, enough of, comparisons. The war has begun, which meant Duryodhana, it's too late now. You have taken one ego choice another after another. Now you have to face your own dark creation. Ooh. And, when hearing this, what happened was that immediately all the different leaders of that Kaurava force, Duryodhana's force, started, blowing their respective conches. And we have the next few lines which say, Tataha, thereafter, Shankhascha Bhairyascha, Padavana Kago Mukhaha, Sahaseva Bihantyanta, Sa Shabdastumulo Bhavata, Tata Shvaitir Hayar Yukte, Mahati Syandane Sitao, Madhava Pandavaschaiva, Divyau Shankau Pradatmatu, Panchajanyam Rishikesho, Devatattam Dhananjaya, Paundram Dadamau Mahashankham, Bhima Karma Vrikodaraha, Ananta Vijayam Raja, Kunti Putro Yudhishthiraha, Nakula Sahadevascha, Sughosha Manipushpakau, Kashyascha Parameshwasa, Shikhandi cha Maharataha, Drishtadyumno Viratascha, Satyakischa Parajitaha, Drupado Draupadeyascha, Sarvasha Prithivipate, Saubhadrascha Mahabahuhu, Shankhan Dadhamu Prathak Prathak, Saghosho Dhartarashtranam, Hidyani Vedarayat, Nabhascha Prithvim Chaiva, Tumalo Vyanu Nadayan. Atha vyavasthit tan drishtva dhartarashtran kapi dhvajaha pravette shastra sampate dhanuraddamya pandavaha. This is where till I will teach, and let us continue and then we shall discuss. So when they heard Bhishma, the grandsire from the Kaurava side, blow his conch, immediately what happened was all the leaders of the various 11 huge mega swollen troops of Duryodhana's team started respectively blowing thereafter their conches, shankha, kettle drums, bhairascha, and trumpets, panavana, and drums, kaga, mukhaha, horns. You can imagine it was like all together, sahaseva bihayantaha, all of them together. So it was like a tumulo nada. It was like a huge cacophony of various kinds of aggressive daredevil sounds, and so they were all happening together. Such a cacophony. Tumulanada. Tumul is the word. Okay. Now, hearing this, that means Kaurava's side had declared, we are here, we are ready. So now naturally the Pandava's side, Arjuna's side with Krishna had to respond. And then we see, and Soham shall forward you later this beautiful image, not original to me, I've borrowed from the internet. Thank you, internet. But we see that Shwetar Hayar Yukte Mahati Sandane, a wonderful, majestic chariot driven by white horses, in which was seated Madhava, Krishna, and Arjuna. And they too blew their conches. And Rishikesha, which is another name for Krishna. Rishikesha means one who is the master of their senses. He blew the conch called Panchajanya. Here it is. Can you see this image? Yeah. Here are these beautiful, beautiful 5. This special, by the way, it is known as Shwetar Hayar Yukte Mahati Sandane. This special chariot was actually gifted to Krishna and Arjuna prior in another story in the Mahabharata. They were both wandering through the forest and they came across the god Agni. And here they are blowing their beautiful conches, you know. Krishna is blowing on Panchajanya, and Devadattam is the conch name of Dhananjaya or Arjuna. So they are blowing this. Okay. So let's go back to the image of the chariot, if we can, Soham. And this chariot was gifted to Arjuna by none other but Agni Devta, the god of Agni. Because Agni Devta was trying to set a certain forest on fire. Because, you know, that's what Agni does. It sets from time to time certain forest on fire because that is what Mother Earth wants. And also there was a lot of dark forces living in the forest. So Agni Devata wanted to consume that. But there was a snake living there, and he went up to Indra. And Indra was known to be the ego of gods. And he said, I don't want Agni Devta to do their work because it inconveniates me. It's inconvenient to me. So can you just create some rains and all the wood and the trees will become wet, and then Agni Devta won't be able to do their work. And that's what Indra did, because Indra just works on being pleased and likes and dislikes. So when Arjuna and Krishna went in, they found a very frustrated lord of Agni. But Krishna and Arjuna together worked to make sure that there can be a fire, a colossal spiritual fire in that forest. And as a result, Agni Dev was so pleased that he gifted him this chariot with a white, it was a huge chariot, huge, like a planet unto itself. And these white horses, they are Shweta, they are white. And we in Vedanta or in Vedic Parampara have a very special place for Shweta, white colored objects, because they represent Sattva, or the state of purity. So there's symbolism here. They also represent Mother Saraswati, who's, you know, Ya Kuntendo Tushara Hara Dhavla, Ya Vastravita. She wears white. And so it's very special that sitting in that beautiful Mahati Sandane Sita, sitting in that beautiful one, they too picked up their divine conches, and they have different names of their conches, and they blew them. And then the chief of Arjuna's army, Bhima, his brother, he blew a conch known as Poundram. And it's very interesting that Bhima is called by another epithet called Vrikodaraha. Now, Vrika means wolf, and Udaraha means stomach. So Bhima was a bulky man. Probably he was born 12 pounds. And have you met people who are so well developed at birth, and they eat so much, and yet they have a flat stomach, an inward stomach, like a wolf does? I remember I had a wolf, a German shepherd, Saki. and she could eat large amounts of food, and yet her stomach was inward. And I have actually a cousin whose name is Bhim. We call him Bhim. Bhim Bhaiya rather, because he was born 12 or 13 pounds. He ate very well, and yet he would not have one piece of flab. He's very strong and lean, and his stomach tucked in. So it's very beautiful. So in a way, by using the word vrikodaraha, they are describing the majestic, bulky, Hulk-like beauty and chiseled beauty of Arjuna's brother Bhima. And he blew a divine conch called Poundram. And then the another elder brother, Dhritarashtra, the other elder brother, Yudhishthira, who is also known as Kunti's son, Kuntiputra, Yudhishthira, he blew the name of the conch called Ananta Vijayam. Now, do you see how the author is slightly showing his preference for the noble team? Because when he was talking about the conches of rowed by Kaurava's team, they all blew it together. Horns, kettle drums, trumpets, everything happened, and there was a big tumul nad, huge big cacophony, boom. But now when he's describing that other beautiful noble army, he's giving the who blew it, what was the name of that divine conch, and each conch has its own, glory, by the way, that I'm not going into right now. So Yudhishthira, the other brother, blew a conch called Ananta Vijayam. And then the other two brothers, Nakulaha and Sahadevaha, they blew respectively conches called Sughosha and Sughosha Mani, and the other one, Mani Pushpak. And then a great archer, Kashi, the king of Kashi, Shikhandi, the son of Drona, Drishtadimno, Virata, Satyaki, which are all undefeated, Aparajita, they all blew their conches. And then the sons of Draupadi, the father of Draupadi, the sons of Sobhadra, they all also blew their conches. And then what happened? Prithak, their own individual conches. And then it's very interesting. He says, Saghosho Dhart Rashranam Hidyani Vedaret. On hearing these divine conches and trumpets and kettle drums and drums coming from that sattvic side, it pierced the hearts of Duryodhana and his team members. Pierced them. It didn't feel good. They felt small. They felt scared deep down. And this beautiful sounds of the conches from Krishna and Arjuna and Bhima and Yudhishthira and Nakula and Sahadeva and all their supporters, it filled up the space between Prithvi, earth, and Nabha, sky. Everywhere this world war, the original world war, was happening. And finally, my last shloka for you today is that after these sounds happened, Arjuna says to Krishna, in Shloka 20, he says, and let me read it to you from this book. Then Arjuna, whose banner bore the crest of Hanumana, looked at the sons of Dhritarashtra drawn up in battle order. He went up to, he looked at that side, and he said to that, O great Rishikesha, he said, Vakyam idamaha, these following words, that Arjuna uvacha senyor ubayor madhye ratham sthapaya mitchuta yavadetan niriksheham yodhu kaman avastitan kair mayasa yodhavyam asmin ran samutyame Yotsu syaman anveksheham Ya etetra samagataha dhartarashtrasya durbuddhe yuddhe priya chikirsavaha. So he says, Hey Rishikesha, hey Krishna, please take me in the middle, take me right in the middle of where the two armies are, take me closer to that other army. I want to look. So observe the men who are standing on the other side, eager for battle, with whom I have to contend. I wish to look at them to see who are assembled. And who are these people who are so eagerly supporting my evil cousin Duryodhana? And here I am, because up till now, Krishna had been deliberating for 13 years that he must go to war. He was ready for war. And in fact, to juice up his adrenaline, perhaps, he asked Krishna, take me closer. Let me look at the people I have to fight so that probably I could strategize. And then what happens thereafter is what we will look at next time. But I would suggest that you yourself look up until 1 to 23, these shlokas, and read up on them so that we can continue shloka 24 onwards when Sanjay Uvacha, and then Sanjay talks about how Krishna led him towards Duryodhana's side, and what did Arjuna see? As a result, what attachments ragaha came up, which then elicited shokaha, which then elicited mohaha. And then perhaps the mohaha that this first chapter depicts then becomes the solution to that mohaha, how to overcome it and achieve moksha, is then what is taught by Lord Krishna from verse 11, chapter 2, all the way to chapter 18. I think it's verse 71. This is the answer to it. And as he teaches, we as students, as people who are listening into this divine conversation, also break free from ragaha, shokaha, and mohaha. And we also find the teacher of teachers, Jagat Guru, Lord Krishna, teaching to each one of us personally. We will find in this chapter itself, and I'd like you to pay attention to it, that we saw how Arjuna went up to his teacher Drona, talked rudely to him, spoke monologue, blame-gamed, complained, compared, and his samsara, his emotional world was full of blame, suspicion of his own teacher. So if he has suspicion of his own teacher's motives, think about all the others, that he was not feeling secure in spite of having what he had in his life. So we have this one sort of emotional person. And then we will find that Arjuna, even though he has dharma in his heart, he has politeness when he addresses his teacher Krishna, because intuitively he knows that Krishna has more knowledge than him. They may not have an official Guru-Shishya relationship yet, though they will soon have. But he intuitively knew that here is more knowledge, more wisdom. So the way he conducts himself, the way his protocols are, and how he doesn't blame others but looks at his own self. But he too is emotional. So in a sense, both are a little emotional. They are. Now, it's interesting, the two kinds of emotions that we see here. Pay attention. When our ego is full blown, and it's full of rajas and tamas, the gunas of turbulence and veiling of our real self, ignorance veiled agitation, push, drive, but deep down we don't even know why we are so driven, but we want something anyway. The kind of emotional discharges we have are usually laden with history, laden with the sense of ego, laden with blame, laden with somehow re-establishing our identity of suffering. So even there, It was not like Duryodhana was happy that everybody had shown up, including his teacher, to take his side. Yeah, I have 11 troops versus their 7. Yep, my grandfather and my teacher, our common grandfather and teacher are with me. No, none of that gratefulness or appreciation. It was all about how nothing was enough and how he was ultimately the victim. He was just not happy. And then we see another kind of emotional dissonance, but it's a slightly of a subtle nature where we'll find that Arjuna has a much more pure heart. It has much more sattva. It has pain for another. So even though he has some attachment, he doesn't want to actually kill his grandfather, his own teacher, his own brothers, cousins, in-laws, nephews. But you can see that both are emotional, but one is of a slightly superior nature. He's not just concerned about him, he's concerned about whether his actions would be justified towards them. So you can see that which kind of emotional state will actually find a teacher. And that even though both were bewildered in their own way, Arjuna's bewilderment was ended by his guru, by his teacher. So one kind of student found a correct way out of bewilderment, and the other one died belligerent. Even when he was dying, he was belligerent. So you can imagine that there is a Duryodhana streaking through this planet, through multiple universes, being born again and again, belligerent, blaming the other. Each one of us has a Duryodhana, each one of us has an Arjuna. The goal of this chapter is to get ready to receive knowledge and stop blaming outside, and even look at the kind of emotional stories that we tell ourselves. Let me just conclude now by saying to each one of you that Rome was not built in a day. Be very patient. This first chapter does have a lot of names and a story and having to remember which side, what side, but even offer samarpan to that. Let it go. Let us go through this chapter 1 over 2-3 classes, and then we shall begin with chapter 2, prepared to end our moha and become ready for moksha. And with each chapter as we go forward, you shall find that you are having more and more personal freedom. And I want to just say this, that our ego, our ahamkara, which is caught up in rajas and tamas, it doesn't live in the now. It lives in memories. So you have a memory of yourself, and every moment you resurrect that memory. But if you really look at me now again fresh, if you receive this knowledge that I'm saying fresh without memory, it's like, oh yeah, I'm used to Shunya talking, so that's just the same thing. Oh, I've heard all of this. Just be present in the moment without memory and without judgments from previous memory of this helps others and not me. I've been through this path before, and that's just be present now and see me fresh with your 5 senses. Receive this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita without memory and judgment towards yourself or this world. Then you have really become present to receiving. This is pure Shravanam. Shravanam is happening actively through your ears, eyes, and your whole being. It is not happening through memory. And then in the present moment, contemplate, and we shall keep it going. Chapter 2 onwards, we might need to meet more than once. We will decide upon that.